So welcome to everyone. Welcome to our joint WNS Procurement and CASME webinar looking at indirect procurement in 2024. My name's Crawshaw, the Procurement Content Director at CASME, and delighted to have a great panel for you today to actually share some of our thoughts about what is going on in indirect procurement. Let's do some introductions, and then we'll look at what we're going to cover and get into the conversation. So Justin, great if you could introduce yourself. Welcome to the webinar.
Yeah, thank you, Graham, and thank you for being able to participate in today's webinar. Hello and welcome to all of our audience and participants this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are across the world. My name is Justin Verdon. I'm with Amgen, based in Thousand Oaks, California. I'm Amgen's Executive Director and Global Head of Indirect Procurement. A little bit about myself. I've been in the procurement profession for over 17 years now, the entirety of which I've spent in indirect procurement. So I've done a myriad of roles spanning category management across the spectrum of services that are in the indirect space, as well as a number of leadership roles. In my current responsibility within Amgen, very much focus in on indirects that are really core to the sales and marketing organization, as well as a number of our professional services that are leveraged across our corporate functions and across the enterprise. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this webinar this morning.
Cool. Justin, thank you so much. Aditya, let's go to you.
Hey, good morning, everybody from sunny California. I'm Aditya Jain. I am based in Palo Alto and have been in sourcing for about 20 years, half in industry like P&G and such, and half in consulting like Accenture and BCG. Done pretty much a lot of categories and roles and indirect, sourcing, transformation systems, operating models and such. But in my current role at Visa, I manage about over $1 billion in spend in indirect for relating to corporate real estate, all the HR, and as well as the professional services.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you. And over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Graham, and thanks to my fellow panelists today. My name is Greg Anderson, and I am the North American practice leader at WNS Procurement. And WNS Procurement, our mission is to enable procurement to become the top value creator in the business by implementing transformational operating models that are category-driven, insights-led, and digitally enabled. My responsibilities are for all of our client relationships in North America, both bringing in new clients in terms of growth, but as most importantly is making sure that those clients are successful once they partner with us. So great to be here today, Graham, and look forward to the discussion with our panelists.
Excellent. Thank you. And a reminder to everyone recording this session, that recording will be made available to you for future reference. If you want to ask any questions, please use the Q&A box. And as always, we'll try to get through as many as we possibly can in the time that we've got allowed for this. Okay, indirect procurement in 2024. You don't need me to say we have been through some very volatile times. Are they still continuing? Well, I think the answer is yes, because we've still got a lot of countries that are having elections this year, and we know that in itself is providing some volatility. But is the light at the end of the tunnel? Are we likely to get some more stability? Looking forward to hearing the panel's views on that. You can't also help avoid the hype around the whole digitalization and AI that's coming to procurement. Not something that you can ignore, but equally challenging for many companies, especially those that are concerned about security or intellectual property having an impact. So it's right in this time of the year that we actually look what really is going on. I want to start with a poll, because I think with so many people, well over 115 already on the call, it'd be fascinating to get your views And then we're going to see how that's aligned with the panel members. So let's go for the first poll, and that should be appearing. Let me, sorry. Let's launch that first poll. And what we want to, is that, you can see that? Cool. What we want to ask you is, what do you believe will have the most impact on indirect procurement for the remainder of 2024 and going into 2025? So really the next 12 months. And we'd like to get your sort of views on this. So is it all about the advancements in technology and automation and AI? Is it still the focus on cost optimization strategies? Is it all around the data and insights to help you make decisions? Is it a risk management concern and practice that is evolving? Is it the fact we've got issues around labor and talent shortages, specifically supporting indirect procurement? Or is it about inflation and the effect on contracts and suppliers? You've only got one choice. So having assessed all of those, which is impacting you and your organization for this next sort of 12-month period? We're doing well. We've got about 90 responses. Going to give you just a few more seconds, because I think I love doing this immediate benchmarking, because it gives a real pulse as to what is going on in procurement and what everyone is thinking, whether you're based in North America, Europe, or even further afield. Let's end the poll and then just have a look at those results. I'll briefly sort of talk them through just to make it clear for everyone, and then I want to get the panel's view on this. Inflation. I'm not surprised. Inflation and its effect on contracts and suppliers has just hit the post at 28%. Then the advancements around technology and automation and AI at 25%, and then cost optimization at 21%. And then, as you can see, those then drop quite significantly. So inflation, automation, and cost optimization, or even cost reduction pressures, those are the top three. Everyone agree to that? Aditya, let's go to you first. Do you agree? Is you finding the same as far as Visa is concerned?
Right, Graham. I think if we look at the polls here, the top three are pretty, I would expect them to be there. Inflation, CFOs are asking for cost optimization so that they can invest in the business and invest in growth. And that's a lot of opportunities there, a lot of uncertainty in the market. So they're all connected there. But what I'm particularly also intrigued by is that labor and talent shortages and evolving risk management practices are kind of at the bottom of the poll here. So I think it's interesting poll with the top three identified as the right ones, with inflation being the top of mind for people.
Excellent. Justin.
Yeah, I think this tracks with my experience here at Amgen. I think as the financial pressures exist in our business, my observation is you go to where you have discretion, and oftentimes that discretion is going to be in the indirect spend area and categories. And so it's also not surprising that these three are kind of all interconnected in a way, right? So cost optimization, yes, that's definitely our reality. Inflation is probably a hurdle you have to overcome to create those. And yeah, as I think about technology, this is for us, I would say, still an emerging space to be exploring and understanding from an indirect procurement point of view, not only as an enabling capability in our business, but also how do we use technology as an offset to inflation and to unlock further cost optimization. So not surprising to see these top three, and it definitely tracks with what I'm seeing in our organization.
Excellent, thank you. And Greg, just before you answer, I've noticed the corner of my eye a request for that definition or understanding of indirect procurement. Could you elaborate on that just to make sure we're really clear for everyone?
Yeah, so the definition of indirect procurement, is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I like to easily define it as everything that a company buys that does not end up in the product that they sell, right? So that's professional services. Big categories we see are IT, that's software as well as hardware. Transportation, if there's a heavy transportation component for a manufacturer, just a company that has distribution, right? So it's everything that doesn't end up in the product itself.
Yeah, I would certainly agree that there are a few grey areas for some companies, but let's not get caught in that. What are your thoughts on the poll?
Yeah. My thoughts, the one item that was up pretty high, I guess it always is anymore, but technology, and it wasn't as specific to Gen AI, but Gen AI is being talked about a lot. But I just saw a survey that came out from an analyst that covers this space and Source to Pay, and basically the conclusion there was right now people are still adopting a wait and see approach with a lot of the emerging technology to see how it works. I think it's a popular topic. I think technology and procurement has been advancing for years, but the application of Gen AI is still being sorted out, I think, by a lot of companies. I recently attended a course to learn about an executive education course my company sponsored through Carnegie Mellon, and a lot of people are still figuring out the data security and the privacy aspects of the data sets, and making sure that the answers, there aren't any hallucinations, an unusual term, but in the answers, to make sure that the data sources are accurate. So a lot happening there, but I think we're in the really early innings of Gen AI. In terms of other technology, sure, I think it's a continuing evolution of the procurement technology, a lot of new solutions that are coming into the space, and also a lot of sorting out, I think, of the solutions that are out there today as companies, win and lose in the market.
Okay, excellent. So having set the scene, having got a good understanding as to what everyone on this call is thinking, we thought we would cover 4 distinct areas around indirect procurement, and it sort of relates. So we're going to start by looking at inflation in a bit more depth, then look at labor and talent shortages, risk management, and then finally that engaging stakeholders, that ongoing challenge that procurement still finds itself facing. So let's look at inflation. First of all, I mean, on one hand, you could say at last it is coming down. The rate of inflation is lower in many countries, but it's still a challenge for procurement. Justin, at Amgen, are you done with inflation? What sort of challenges does that still bring to you?
Definitely not done with inflation. I would think of this in a few ways, and this was a little bit crystallized for us through the large spikes of inflation that we all experienced during COVID. Is it really brought it to the forefront of our attention in terms of, do we actually have an ability to identify and measure inflation and the impact of that in our indirect categories or with specific vendors? How are we going to solve the problem if we don't really even have the ability to identify and isolate it? So that's something that we've spent quite a bit of time developing. I would say it's not a perfect science. There's a bit of an art to it. You never really get to the full answer, but that's the first thing I would point out to, is you have to have the ability to understand what's happening, and let alone then develop plans against it. As I think about it, then in our business, there's a few things that it's then created for us, and there's a lot to talk about here, but I'll maybe give one financial consideration and maybe one non-financial consideration in terms of the impacts of inflation. It's no question that through this inflationary period that continues to persist and is still a focus area for us, it's really challenging the indirect procurement organization to really understand our cost drivers and to understand our supplier economics more than we ever have before. I think we tend to sometimes focus on, what are my rates? What's the inflation on my rates? You really have to get below the surface and understand what's going on in your supplier's business to really understand how to unlock the value that can overcome those inflationary pressures. So that's just like a call to action let alone the broader pressures that are put on us now from our CFO orgs, which I'm sure everyone is experiencing. The other thing that I would raise from a non-financial perspective, which I correlate back to inflation, is I think it's changing the landscape in this concept of, as you think about your partnerships with vendors in the indirect space, where are you actually a client of choice? Because where you are a client of choice, how inclined is your supplier to work with you to overcome these challenges? And there's going to be a number of ramifications that we've experienced, ranging from erosion of service. I know we're going to talk about talent a little bit later, but all of these things I believe are interconnected to inflation. And again, that status of how strategically partnered are you with your companies in potentially categories where you have a lot of choices and a lot of competition, sometimes that can make or break your ability to overcome the inflation using, let's say, non-traditional or more strategic levers in order to unlock the impacts of inflation on your business.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Greg, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think Justin hit on a lot of really key points there. And I would build by saying, looking at US, for instance, across industries, what's projected in terms of wage increases. This year, it's anywhere from 3.1 to 4.6%, depending upon the industry that you're in. And those wage inflation, right? That inflation has to be either managed through some cost reductions at your suppliers, or they're going to pass some of that, or try to pass some of that onto you as a consumer of their services, or whatever even if they're providing goods to you, there's a labor component in those goods. So a lot of companies are coming to us now asking about cost modeling, like to understand, as Justin got to, what are the real drivers? And is the way we're asking for a service to be delivered, for instance, are we our own worst enemy and causing ourselves to pay more for that service because of the way we've spec'd it out? So I think people are looking at what's the result we're trying to drive from that service, and what's the best way to get that service delivered to us to make sure the result's there, but not sort of specify in such a way that we make it more expensive. So there's a lot of attention being paid to the drivers of cost out there, is what we're seeing across our clients.
Okay, excellent. Aditya, what's it like at Visa?
Yeah, so Visa has a unique position because we get to see about trillions of dollars of payment flows worldwide. So we drive analytics into those payment flows, and we actually have seen that consumer spending has not been impacted because of inflation. So that's a good trend, but we keep a close track on it. But that's on the revenue side for us. And that actually translates on the buy side for us as well, because we have pressures once there's uncertainty. What we are seeing actually in inflation and volatility are connected. Yeah. So we're more concerned about volatility and how do we manage through this volatile period or these uncertain periods, right? And what I'm seeing is that's from a category management perspective. I mean, typically we'll sign contracts between 1 and 3 years, sometimes less, sometimes more. And if anybody's telling me, like you mentioned, there's elections in this year and next year in Europe and Americas, and volatility is here to stay. Yeah. So the question becomes on the buy side, on the indirect side, is how do you manage through this volatility, given that there is inflation, whether regardless of what the rate is. And that leads to really driving insights into our categories and making bold decisions quicker. So that's where technology comes in. That's where AI comes in. How do you synthesize information very quickly, make a decision? How do you train yourself, and how the category managers to make decisions in uncertain times with incomplete information?
Excellent. I know from our experience at CASME, we've seen an increase in the number of organizations issuing out tenders or RFP documents, almost wanting to re-establish the baseline of pricing for indirect contracts, recognizing that because we've had the volatility, the only true way to know what that should cost is either do the modeling, but often it can be easier just to really go out to the marketplace and evaluate what suppliers are prepared to offer in terms of pricing. But whether it is that modeling, the should cost, the total cost of ownership, we may have done that well for directs. I think now's the time we've got to do a lot more detail for indirects. Any other tips from you in terms of perhaps people listening that are struggling with inflation? Maybe if there's no option to switch suppliers, if it's more of a monopoly situation or limited. Any advice on that, how to manage it?
I think I can take a shot at it. It's grammar. So one advice I would have is establish yourself with your stakeholders as having a point of view on the long-term volatility, the long-term economics of an industry, and where's demand coming in from, where's supply coming in from, and you have to constantly update it. One thing you can be sure is because you're not going to be able to predict commodity prices or prices of energy and so on and so forth accurately, but you should be able to predict the trends. And if you have a view on the trend and can have a way to convince factually your stakeholders, your CFO, when is the best time to buy and how much to buy. That can be a competitive advantage for you as a function and as for your company as well.
Okay, so we're back to that knowledge is power statement that we hear about, and yes, if you've got that, you can then inform and make the right decisions.
Yeah, I would also reinforce the importance of, sometimes in indirect procurement, I think our relationship with our suppliers can, depending on the spend, be maybe a little bit transactional, or the relationship may be pretty superficial. So I do think as you think about where your critical mass is in your spend queue, you really need to be thinking about development of those supplier relationships, which I think is endemic to folks in the direct procurement space. It's part and core of the business based on the challenges, obviously, of moving around vendors. But in the indirects where there's a lot of competition, often a lot of choices, if you really want to get true impact to mitigate something like inflation, it really requires deep relationship building with your suppliers, understanding the suppliers you're not working with, which I think is also a commitment of time, and really connecting that back to the business and helping them also understand what those driving factors are. I think Greg mentioned it. It's an important point. I think we see this a lot in Amgen too. What is the effect that we as the client have on our vendor as it pertains to cost? And again, in the indirect space where we just typically think of ourselves as consuming services, we may not focus so much on our ways of working, but oftentimes those ways of working is where you're going to find the value. So it's really spending a lot of time understanding the environment, developing those strategic relationships, and really trying to go beneath the surface and understanding how to unlock or overcome challenges like inflation.
Okay. Cool. Let's move on to talk about labor and talent, because that's been quite a disruption. And again, I know from CASME surveys that we've done, it's been that labor element that really has driven increases in cost and actually getting the right people to support the contracts. I mean, it's bad enough getting the right talent within procurement, but that whole labor has seemed to be a conversation that's top of the list to have at the moment. What's your experience? Aditya, let's go to you first on that one. What impact is labor and talent having on the work you're doing?
I think it's an important conversation around labor and talent. It's always been, and I think it's less about availability of talent, because when I post roles for hiring, and I feel like I see the quality and the quantity of resumes that come in are tremendous, and it's increased and exponentially over the last few years, and that speaks to how much organizations in the last decade or 2 decades companies have invested in the sourcing function, have invested into the talent of it, and that clearly shows it's a robust talent pool out there. But I think what talent to me means is looking forward. How do you position the young and the upcoming talent who are getting into this in this function deliberately and by choice now, and position them for the next decade to 2 decades and such. And I think that's going to be at a point of inflection on what talent means to the sourcing and procurement function. Gone are the days from category management. Of course, everybody knows how to do a category management today. How do you do an RFP? How do you do negotiations? Those core skills in sourcing and procurement are well established, and people are coming into this function with lots of skills already through their education, through prior experiences. But the new talent today, I think, is going to be about being able to operate in an agile organization. And what I mean by that is, it's like not having, okay, I'm going to do an RFP, or this is my category, and I'm going to manage that category and from one end to another end, right? I'm going to do the spend analysis. I'm going to do the RFPs. I'm going to do supplier relationship management. But you could have actually a group of people with core skills coming together, solving a problem, and then going back and doing something else, solving another problem. So this iterative method of coming together in a team, functioning as a team, having your own value add into that team and solving that problem is core now.
Excellent. Thank you. Greg, what's your assessment based on
Yeah,
all
I
the
think
conversations you're having?
Yeah, people are that we talk with, our clients and prospects out there, and just people I speak with at conferences and other places, are really looking for what is the right team to sort of take us to that next level. So procurement's been fulfilling its promise, making a bigger business impact. Things are going great. And now they're starting to top out. I think you said, people know how to do category management. Some do it way better than others. I'll submit that. But what if the skill set that I think is probably the most valuable, if I was coach, I have 4 children, they're all in their 20s. I would say, listen, learn how to tell stories to convey what you're trying to get across in terms of communication. And that can help you. Let's say you are a category lead and you're going out to a stakeholder in the business and trying to be more involved earlier, right? Everything that procurement wants to do to be able to help them generate value. Storytelling is a super powerful means of doing that. People tend to remember those stories. And I think when you can give people concrete examples, they get it. The other thing is you want to build the credibility of those people, making sure they're well informed about the categories, the trends that are going on in those categories, so that they can have a very positive conversation with stakeholders. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is bring more spend back, right? To say, hey, we're getting in on this early, right? We're going to be part of the move to cloud strategy for the balance of the business. We've got to be ready for this. Then once you get the spend, I think the key, and coming back to talent, is make sure you have enough capacity to take care of that spend in the right way, right? So the worst thing you can do is start getting more spend coming in and not have the ability to serve it, because then the stakeholders will go right back to doing it themselves or finding another means, right, to work around procurement, because you don't want to be the bottleneck. So you have to really think of it as a system when you think of your talent. Is, do I have the right people at the front end? Once that front end's working well and creates activity, do I have the right talent and the right amount of talent to execute on the projects that are coming our way and to deliver the results? Ultimately, you want to build a machine in procurement that can deliver business outcomes. So they have to be the right people with the right smarts about the right categories and topics, and the right people that can execute and run it all the way through the system effectively. So I think you need to look at your talent strategy end to end. And but more and more, we're seeing people that are trying to be more strategic. I'd say go out there and invest in sending your people to storytelling courses, and start using storytelling in what your interactions with stakeholders. It really unlocks a lot that it didn't unlock before.
Excellent. Thanks for that piece of advice, Greg. We'll all rush off and make sure we sign up to something now. Justin, do you agree that there is plenty of talent to support procurement? There's no shortage of resumes, or is a teacher with the Visa brand sort of been given priority by those that are applying. What's your take on getting the right people where you need them to do the work in procurement?
Well, I think we're definitely experiencing challenges in terms of accessing the right talent. I do think some of this is influenced by maybe what sector of business you're operating within.
Mm-hmm.
I also would maybe introduce here the impact of geography. So in the case of Amgen, we're a biopharmaceutical company, but we're also on the West Coast. And so we see the concentration of talent probably on the East Coast, where you have a concentration of our industry. Now, how do we access that talent if we're not prepared to offer remote, solutions and other things that probably have been unlocked during COVID? But the question is, how sustainable is that? So, is there talent out there? Yes. Sometimes there may be limitations based on where your company is located or even the brand of your company. I think certainly many of us work for companies that have a reputable brand that a lot of professionals want to come and work for, but that may not be the case for all companies. I participate in a CPO network here on the West Coast, which has a lot of technology, entertainment industries. And I hear the conversations about access to talent all the time. And if you think about some of these brands, interesting brands, but maybe not at the scale and focus of the indirect procurement space. The other thing I would call out here is some of the indirect procurement areas. I think of it as spaces to develop talent, but in some of these categories that are very technical, and here I'm thinking maybe some of our corporate technical services and some of our large spend areas in marketing, you really need to find the right talent at the right level to be successful, depending on what the needs of your business are going to be. That may be cost prohibitive. So depending on your department and your department's budget, you may be able to find the talent, but can you afford the talent, right? So as we talk about inflation of our suppliers, there's definitely been an inflation on access to talent and procurement as well. And so that also represents some challenges that businesses are probably having to deal with. Is you may be able to find the talent, but can you actually bring them in? And in some cases, we may need to think of alternative ways to address certain categories of spend.
Okay. I'm glad you've almost balanced that, because what you describe is certainly what I'm hearing. Majority of the world, I would suggest, is not necessarily finding it that easy, bringing in people and then sort of training some of the specifics that are required in order to get the right people. Procurement's slowly getting there in terms of the reputation that people want to work for the function, but it's still very early days. So I think it's definitely one to watch. So thanks for your ideas and suggestions there. Another hot topic within procurement is very much risk management. Our experience is procurement's getting more and more involved with the risks. It's a value add to the business. Really keen to get the views. I'm going to go back to you, Justin, now. What are the views in terms of risk management at Amgen, and what challenges do you still face?
Yeah, this is a very challenging space to kind of get our arms around. So I think the first challenge is within an enterprise in general, what is the role of procurement in managing a variety of risks versus other functions, right? So we're all working in a matrix organization where you're interacting with IT organizations that are probably looking at cybersecurity. You're going to have legal functions that are obviously looking at risk to the business, et cetera. You may have other third-party, risk management groups that sit in various forums, et cetera. So I think the first thing is identifying where does procurement fit within this ecosystem of risk management, number one. In terms of specific risks that we're seeing, and again, there's a lot here, so I'll only pick on a couple maybe, but certainly there's the emergence of cybersecurity risk. We're experiencing that. It almost feels like the frequency of that has gone up significantly over the last year or two, and I would suspect that trend to be continuing. And as I think about cybersecurity, we do a lot to really align what are the expectations from a cybersecurity point of view, data security point of view with our suppliers. but we're also increasingly seeing the risk not in necessarily with our suppliers, but with our suppliers. So how do we think about our extended supply chain and deal with something like cybersecurity? That's I think a real challenge for us. There's obviously also a number of things in the financial security space, and again, I'm sure many of our companies are using a variety of market intelligence tools that help us understand the financials. But again, I think that's an ongoing thing, again, in the context of also inflation. This is something that we have to look at, particularly with smaller businesses. I think many of us probably work with small, diverse companies. We have certainly seen financial risk emerging as we look at some of those types of suppliers.
Excellent. Any key tip in terms of cybersecurity? Where should someone start if they've not done anything on it at all?
Well, again, I think you first got to define what are your requirements. What are the risks that you're trying to ultimately manage to, and to be able to, in a clear manner, articulate that to your suppliers in terms of expectations, and really then pull that through your contractual agreements. So I think that's, for me, the first thing is have transparency, have alignment within your enterprise of what are the risks you're trying to control, and really ensure that your suppliers understand that. And then there has to be a capability in place to really monitor that on a regular cadence.
Right. Teacher, what's your thoughts? I'm sure cybersecurity is key to Visa. Any other risk management areas that you're working on?
Absolutely. I think, Graham, what's happened in the last few years is that there's emergence of data and cybersecurity, those two elements from a risk perspective. And Visa, where we run one of the most secure networks in the world, cybersecurity, there's absolutely zero tolerance to any risk taking in cybersecurity, and that has significant impact on sourcing, because when we try to sign a new contract or onboard new vendors, obviously we are given the responsibility of making sure that our supply base adheres to the expectations that we have around data privacy and cybersecurity requirements. Yeah, so that has an impression on our stakeholders that the process has been elongated. One of the things that we have done is educate our both internally and our external supply bases to make sure that they understand where we stand, or where Visa stands in terms of data privacy as well as cybersecurity. Yeah, and working together. Let's get reasonable here. Sometimes we over-index too much on conservativeness. Yeah, so we have to be a little bit more targeted and precise on what specific areas of cybersecurity are we focused on, what specific areas of data privacy, which categories are we more focused on, which more are less sensitive to, and where are we. And we have to change behaviors as well. Where are we sharing PII? Where are we not sharing PII? Today, everything that we buy, or most things that we buy, have some sort of a digital component to it, whether it's an app or it's some sort of a reporting and such. So we're having to actually look at our requirements, look at our specifications, look at our processes internally, as well as how we train our people to navigate through data privacy and cybersecurity, educate stakeholders. All of that has just increased the workload within the sourcing function.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Greg. What would you like to add?
I think I can add maybe a different perspective on risk too. I think if you look at procurement's generally dealing with supply risk, right? It's something related to the people you're choosing to do business with. So if we start there, then I think risk is really difficult, right? I'm not going to pretend there's an easy answer here, because it seems like you're always compromising. If I have less suppliers and I consolidate down to one, I'll have less risk, right? Because there's less people, that could cause problems. But what if something goes wrong with that one and only supplier I have, right? So now I'm creating risk by eliminating other risk. It's really tough to balance that out. So I think segmenting suppliers and looking at them from a risk perspective and saying, okay, what impact can they have on our business? The worst supplier segmentation starts just by doing it with spend. And that's where a lot of people would naturally start. We spend a lot of money with them, but if you spend a lot of money with an office supplies supplier, if something goes wrong there, you're fine. You can flip that in one day, right?
Mm.
It's not going to shut down your business. But it might be a supplier where you don't have a massive spend, you have a reasonable spend, and but if something went wrong there, they could really impact your business, right? So that's why we encourage our clients to look at the impact that supplier can have on your business, and then come up with an appropriate risk strategy for people in that cohort. And then you have different levels of risk management that you apply to those cohorts of suppliers based on impact to the business and anything else that's of concern, right? I realize any cyber risk, if one supplier way down in that tier of cohorts could cause you big problems if there was some kind of a data breach that came in through their system into yours. But I think most risks can be managed more effectively if you segment your suppliers out and say, okay, how do we want to manage the high impact suppliers, the medium impact suppliers, the low to no impact suppliers, and manage them appropriate. Put the right controls in place, the right monitoring in place, the right contingency plans in place for the high impact ones, obviously, and spread your risk out through dual sourcing and other means to make sure that you're not you're not boxed in too much when it comes to risk, and it can hurt the business.
Excellent, thank you. Let's get the view of risk management and what everyone is thinking with our next poll. So what is the most pressing risk management challenge in indirect procurement for your organization? You can select one out of bribery and corruption, cybersecurity, we've just been talking about, data security and privacy breaches, financial status of critical and high spend suppliers, issues around modern slavery, child labor and violation of human rights, or supply chain disruption. We've deliberately selected some quite distinct risk areas. Of course, you're probably faced with them all, but we want to know what is the main emphasis that's causing concern that you perhaps would like to address as soon as you possibly can. Literally a few more seconds. You've only got to choose one, so the results are coming in thick and fast. The most pressing risk management challenge, and then very briefly, I'll get everyone's sort of view on the results there. Still coming in. Excellent. In the interest of time, I'm going to end that poll. Thank you for that, and I'm going to share the results. Almost no surprise based on what we've been talking about. Data security number one at 33%. Followed by actually supply chain disruption, just an edge, a couple of percent above the cyber security breaches. Let's just focus on supply chain disruption. Any comments? Is this under control as far as you're concerned at Amgen and Visa, or does it still keep you up at night? Any thoughts to share? Justin?
The thought I would add here is, and again, this is really coming from an indirect procurement point of view where I see some significant differences with how we manage suppliers versus on the direct side. So I'm sure many of us have within our companies what I think of as like operational or capability teams, whether that's in a shared service role or et cetera, that are managing a number of these suppliers. I think that the capability of managing suppliers operationally from a performance point of view, and then vis-a-vis from a supply chain disruption point of view, I see as still an area for growth for our company, and I'm guessing maybe for a lot of other companies. In the past, these groups are really focused on obviously operational performance and delivery of the services to the business. But when that service goes down, what we're finding is we didn't really have risk mitigation plans in place when the supply chain was disrupted. We didn't really have plans in place when cybersecurity breaches are happening, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is really a call to action for a lot of these shared service functions to really think more on the operational control side of their capability versus the customer service side, let's say, of what they do. And in this space, I think there's definitely an opportunity for procurement as an advisor and partner to these groups to really think through. Now, that may come through the form of an SRM or other models. But again, I think this is a real space and opportunity for procurement to really drive what we think of as value beyond savings, really driving supply chain continuity and really having a much more holistic approach to operational management.
Okay, excellent. Thank you,
And
Justin.
Justin, can I ask you to clarify that, is that referring more supply chain on the direct material side, inbound flows into Amgen?
No, I'm
So
thinking.
what's a good of an indirect category that has a supply chain? I'm always interested in understanding this.
So if I think first from a professional services, you're going to have a number of, let's think of it as, you know, your business travel operations, your payroll operations, your HR service operations. On the marketing side, you're going to have centralized capabilities, whether that, you know, media, event planning. So these are all going to be operational groups that are managing your biggest suppliers. Oftentimes they're focused on, let's say, excellence of service or customer experience internally. They're not necessarily focused on risks and business continuity when those emerge. Whereas when I observe how the maturity, if you're in a manufacturing environment where you have large manufacturing partners, there will also be operational groups that are managing those relationships. They're much more rigorous and much more robust in terms of how they just think about these ideas around risk. And so those are some examples I would give.
Excellent. Thank you. In the interest of getting the most we possibly can in this hour, I do want to move on to our final really hot topic around stakeholder engagement. You'd have thought this wouldn't even be an issue, but we hear time and time again the ongoing challenge. So I'd love for the panel to share their views as to how successful engagement can take place, especially with those stakeholders that are reluctant to engage or work with procurement. What's the secret there? Aditya, would you like to kick off? Do you have engagement problems at Visa, or does everyone love procurement?
Yeah, well, I don't think engagement issues are spotty. Some stakeholders are clearly established that sourcing and procurement add value and to love to engage, and so that we have a problem of plenty with them. And some stakeholders would say, all right, the processes, and let's go to sourcing and procurement when we need to, and then that's about where their engaging is. Overall, I would say the sourcing and procurement function over the years has added so much value that we would say that there's a lot of significant traction. Those conversations around engage us early, engage us at the right time, they're there, but they're certainly getting reduced. The question now becomes, why are they engaging us? How are they engaging us? And how do we react to what their expected stakeholder engagements are? So I see a spectrum of engagement models within emerging with our stakeholders once they engage us. One is clearly looking at us as advisory, so go deep into what problem they're trying to solve. We have an equal seat at the table, not an early seat at the table, but we're just having the equal. There's gone are the days that they're a client, we're a service provider, we're a group that is trying to solve a problem, and we have our expertise, whether it is commercial, bringing in commercial acumen, our knowledge of the industry, our knowledge about supplier business models. So that's where I think it's more exciting, where our stakeholders are starting to engage us as more business advisors than as simple sourcing and procurement. You go do an RFP and do a deal. Give you an example of that is like, if let's say today hybrid work models are here to stay. Yeah, some companies would have 2 days, some companies would have 3 days, some companies have more than 3 days, but just 2 to 3 days is something. That on the indirect side, that causes variability in our demand. For example, office space, all the services that our corporate real estate guys are offering, there's an extreme amount of variability when people are in the office and people are not there in the office. Yeah. How do you manage through that variability, and what kind of supplier models do you engage with? Yeah, that's something we have to work with our stakeholders and work with our suppliers. And frankly, we have had to change the business model of our suppliers to make sure that their cost structures, their business models can flex with the variability of demand. Yeah? Right. And that's delivered cost savings, that's delivered cost optimization. So those are the things that our stakeholders are starting to engage our sourcing and procurement functions.
Thank you. Justin, any tips to share?
Yeah, I would advise maybe a few core principles here that I think help us to be more impactful in terms of engaging and influencing our business partners in the indirect space. I think the first one is really something we have to own as procurement, which is we got to do our homework. Indirect procurement is a broad and diverse set of services and capabilities that touch a lot of the functions in your company. You need to really invest time in understanding, your stakeholder map as a starting point. And this isn't just knowing who the people are, but really understanding what are their priorities, how do they take in information, right? If you're interacting with a marketing executive versus a manufacturing executive, you are not dealing with the same type of personality. So you really have to understand how to interact with a diverse set of business executives, number one. I think we really got to lean in and understand how well do we know the business, right? Do we understand our business goals? Do we understand what incentivizes them to do things in terms of their behaviors, in terms of decisions they make? How well do we really understand the financials of our business, et cetera? So that's kind of the first principle I have. And there's a number of other things we could talk about in terms of do your homework, but that's kind of the first thing is take accountability to how deep do you understand your business. The second principle I would introduce is really come as an enterprise leader first and a procurement leader second. At the end of the day, we're solving business problems and we're looking at how do we enable some of those solutions through procurement. Again, it goes back to my first principle. The more you understand the business, the more you can bring that enterprise leadership to the leaders that really helps them solve a myriad of problems. My final principle then is really empower your leaders to be accountable to the outcome. We spend a lot of time procurement speak, showing often kind of the value through procurement. I had this conversation with a marketing executive recently that, when we onboard, marketing to certain procurement projects, we're kind of using them as a voice of customer, but we're not really empowering them to be accountable to the outcome of what we're doing. So I think that's another aspect there. And this is a little bit of a soft skill principle. There's a way of driving to where we want to go as procurement while also bringing them along the journey and also having them really take ownership of what we're trying to do, which ultimately accelerates what procurement's priorities are going to be.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you, Justin. And I'm going to come to you, Greg, but at the same time, we're going to multitask, but I want to put up the third poll that we've got, which is looking about that value beyond cost saving that Justin's just been talking about. And we'd like to get your view on that. So on the screen there, managing which of the following is enabling procurement to deliver value beyond cost saving. Options being cost avoidance, innovation, market intelligence, risk mitigation, stakeholder engagement, ESG compliance, total cost of ownership. So you can look at selecting that, but you can only select one. Greg, whilst people are responding, what are your thoughts in terms of that stakeholder engagement piece?
Sure, a quick summary. So I think first and foremost, you have to go in there with a business mindset, as Justin spoke to, and say, what outcomes is this person, understand what outcomes they're on the hook to deliver for the business. Those are often very publicly well-known within the business. If not, just ask. Second, here's a pro tip hack I got from a great sales trainer once, but it's AAA. As you prepare for any phone call, if I'm going to talk to an executive, I want to make sure I make great use of their time, but I want to come away with really three things as I prepare for the meeting and come out of the meeting. First, what answers am I looking to get from this conversation, right? Through the discussion we're about to have, what answers do I need to know so that I can help this person and build confidence with this person and really show them I can help with those outcomes. Second, what actions do you want them to agree to? Actions. What actions, they're going to give me more information on the initiative. They're going to share their latest presentation. They're going to share some financial numbers that they have to hit, whatever it is. You get them to agree to actions and further engagement with you. And third, think about the attitude you want them to have about yourself and about procurement coming out of that meeting. right? I want them to feel like they're not getting involved to slow me down. They're not getting involved to be a compliance cop. They're getting involved to help me achieve what I need to achieve. And I can really feel that. And it has to be genuine. You can't BS your way through this, by the way. You have to be genuine and you have to understand what they're doing. So that's what I encourage people to do. Any call you have, AAA, answers, actions, and attitude.
Excellent. Great piece of advice there. Thank you. Thank you for that, Greg. And actually sharing the results of that value beyond cost saving. Stakeholder engagement has got the longest line at 31%. So it's really reassuring the sort of how everything all dovetails sort of nicely together, whether it is the work that you're doing on inflation, the challenges with labor and talent, the challenges around risk management, and actually making sure you're delivering what your stakeholders are looking for. Any final comment from the panel? Aditya, final thoughts? I don't know how you'd sum up our last hour's conversation in a statement, but any final message for everyone?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting space to be in, sourcing and procurement, and it's a function that has come a long way, and it's got its relevance even more embedded within the enterprise here. In many roles that I've had, one key thing has emerged is that how you manage the stakeholder and your connection with the stakeholder, your connection with the business, how you create an impact for them and for the business is key to success in any role, in any sourcing and procurement role that you have in the organization.
Excellent. Thank you. Justin.
Yeah, I would agree. I think indirects is an exciting place to be right now. There's obviously a lot of pressure facing a lot of different companies. And I think indirects is where a lot of that impact is going to have to be driven out of. I also think it's some of the spaces where, company executives know the least about. And so I think in that context, that presents a real opportunity for impact from a procurement point of view to really lead in terms of understanding of not only what these categories are about, what are the solutions, and I think that's very exciting to be in such an influential position. So I would encourage everyone to take advantage of that.
Absolutely. Why would you want to work anywhere else other than procurement based on everything that's going on? Greg, last thoughts from yourself.
The panelists here, Justin and Aditya, have done a nice job of highlighting a lot of key concepts and the importance of indirect. I think indirect still has a lot of runway in terms of making it as well managed, as attention getting, so to speak, as direct materials, right? Anything in the product is always sort of the most important thing. It has such an impact on cost of goods sold and everything. But indirect, there's great opportunities to really understand and learn about the business too. Where do you get to talk to marketing? Where do you get to talk to IT? So many different functions across the company that you're helping, and you can learn more about the business, and you can make a huge impact on the outcomes those folks are looking to drive. So stick with indirect and learn what you can. Explore new categories and just keep getting better. I'd say I think there's a ton of opportunity in indirects.
Excellent. And clearly people love your answers, actions, and attitude statement. We'll address questions offline. We've run out of time. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much to Aditya, to Justin, and from Greg and myself. Thank you for this being part of this update of Indirect Procurement 2024, and we look forward to a further update in the not too distant future. Until then, thank you all for support today, and goodbye for now.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.